Welcome, everyone. I hope that I pushed the right button just now, but I'm so excited. I feel so good about how we are right now with conference and the way that everything went. I certainly wish that we could have met face to face, and I missed that opportunity to see all of you in the hallways and having a drink with everyone and having and just being able to share in that camaraderie. But we all hope that this virtual conference was fulfilling to all of you and gave you something to be inspired about for the future. I am personally really inspired by several of the sessions that I went to. It had kind of a Midwest feel in a way, because a lot of the sessions that were going on, I wanted to go to another session. But the really cool thing about all of this is that it's available for us to look at in the future and beyond. So I'm really excited about that as well. So many fantastic sessions, man. I can't tell you about all of that stuff. I'm so excited. I just can't remember the Lmea conference, although there were some really good conferences, some sessions in the past. This was really great. Speaking of Midwest, in going to the Midwest clinics, I was always inspired many times by the session that many of you just saw with Colonel Bourgeois. Just being able to sit back and listen to the people who have come before us, it's just so inspiring and so interesting to me. I remember sitting in the Hilton Ballroom and getting to listen to Frederick Fennell talk about how he started and the history that he had in the modern band movement. So it just got me to think that one day I would like to be able to sit down and have a fireside chat with some of the people who have come before us and share the history of Lmea and why things are the way they are right now, and kind of look at some of the new leadership and looking into the future. So that's kind of the wrap-up session that I had in mind here, kind of a past, present, and future. We're going to go on, and I'll introduce the people that are serving on our panel right now. So first, the baby of the group, Brett Babineaux. He's been teaching for 23 years, mostly band, but has also taught guitar, choir, and elementary music. His schools include some in Iberia Parish at New Iberia Senior High School, at Henry 7th Ward, also in New Iberia, some middle school and high school experience at Lafayette High School, and is currently the band director at Broussard Middle School. Brett, would you kind of share with everybody about how you got involved with Lmea?
Well, that's a great question. To be honest, I didn't at first. I was kind of made me intimidated going into all the experienced teachers. I was so focused on what I was doing, sort of selfishly, and just really concentrating on the program that I was at. I wasn't very active, and then slowly but surely meeting great people like Scotty, getting hooked up with Bruce Lambert, and just understanding that being involved was important. Robin Daigle was also really influential in me getting involved and helping out with Honor Band, and then just moving on into district director and now in an executive role has been really inspiring. And I'm just glad I dove in with, cannonball style into Lmea and our local band directors association.
Thank you, Brett. Yes, all of these people are so inspirational. Someone who has recently retired from the Lmea board, but has been a great inspiration to everyone. He's kind of, for those of you that remember the E.F. Hutton commercials, when Pat Deaville speaks, then everybody listens. He has an extremely calming sense to his voice, and he always has great recommendations for the board. He spent 20 years teaching at high school and middle school levels at Jennings High School, Lake Charles High School, LaGrange High School, S.J. Welch Middle School. He served 20 years. He did 2 years in the Army before that. And then he served on the school as a school administrator for 20 years. So, Pat, could you kind of talk about how you got involved in Lmea?
I got involved in Lmea because Marty Roberts told me that if I didn't join Lmea, I couldn't take my band to festival. And that's how I got involved. And from there, I was part of that pulled me deeper into the district band directors Association, where I really began to kind of learn the ropes of how all of this worked and what was going on. But James Earl Alexander, with named people from the choral side, the Nelda Bays and Annalou Babin and so forth, kind of sucked me into fulfilling a term of office in as district director for Lmea, and that's really what brought me onto the board. And my second year on the board, James Earl Alexander again suckered me into taking over the state music conference, setting up the schedules for that and all the programs and things of that nature, telling me that it wouldn't require a whole lot of my time, which was a big lie. It absorbed a whole lot of my time. And but that's part of how the game works. They bring you in and convince you to do something. A few years after that, unfortunately, Dr. Bulber, who was at that time was the editor of our state magazine, passed away. And Bruce Lambert, as a matter of fact, is the one who approached me and asked me, he said, because I had kind of worked with Dr. Bulber a little bit on the magazine because of the November issue of the conference. And Bruce said, would you be willing to tackle that one? And so I began to, do that as well. And I ended up doing about 25 years as a conference chairman and about 28 years as editor, 33 years on the board. So learned a lot.
Yeah, we all learned a lot from you as well, Pat. Thank you. Yeah, and we talk about how we get involved in the board. In speaking with Annalou Babin, who was the elementary division chair for a while, she said that she wasn't at one of the meetings one year and got nominated and won the election to be the elementary division chair. So we certainly let that be a lesson to everybody out there. Make sure that you attend all of your meetings. Otherwise, you'll get elected to a position. Of course, the next person is as much synonymous with Lmea as any name you've ever heard. There's not a single person in Lmea that has not heard the name Bruce Lambert. And we're so fortunate to have his wisdom all of these years on the board. He taught for 38 years. He's currently the music mentor coordinator for Calcasieu Parish. The schools that he taught at were Zwolle High School, Kinder High School, Sam Houston High School, DeRitter High School, and then finished up at McNeese State University. So Bruce, we were having technical issues earlier. I hope that you can hear me. Can you kind of talk a little bit about how you got involved with Lmea?
Absolutely. A lot of what Pat said, we were parallel in a lot of what was happening in our lives. I had just moved to Kinder. I had taught 1 year up in Zwolle and moved to Kinder and became friends with Barty Roberts, who had one of the best band programs in our state at that time. He was charismatic, got all of us involved. All of us learned how to be a part of a team. The most unselfish people that we were so lucky, Pat and I, that we got involved at a time. Everybody did things because it was the right thing to do, to help the kids, to get involved with it. You didn't do it for any other reason. Barty was band division chair. And at that time, of course, we weren't having a convention. We were doing our all-state groups. So he sweet talked me and my wife. We were the band chaperones for the all-state band, probably the first 5 or 6 years that Barty was involved with it. We would go, this was always happening that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, before Thanksgiving. We would go and meet with the kids. At that time, we fed and housed the kids along with with everything. And we traveled wherever the Teachers Association would set up where they were going to have their meetings throughout the state. So that's where we did ours, because we do our concert part of that Teachers Association. So Debbie and I would go and we thought we were having a great time. We got to see some of the finest conductors and teachers and composers ever. I'd have never been able to meet these kind of people. And Barty opened up a lot of those doors for us to be able to do these kind of things. Kind of like Pat, as they saw that I was gullible enough to raise my hand when they needed help on stuff, I got nominated from our district for district director. Was soundly defeated by the vocal person who was the one that was already our district director, Lmba. We turned out to be the best of friends. She calls it, Bruce, will you do the band stuff for me to keep it all going? I'd be honored, Nelda. What do I do? This was back when we would have, 25, 30 judges for solo ensemble, and we hand typed every sheet. Everything was done. We thought it was, that was what we did. That's how we did things. And she nominated me as band division chair the following year, and I ended up on the board as band division chair. And I happened to hit at a time Easton LaBeouf was president. Catherine Hurd was president-elect. What a phenomenal time. Leon Anderson was our past president. I hit at the greatest time. Anyone that has not got to know Easton LaBeouf in their life, he's our Tim Lutzenheiser. In fact, that's how Tim and I got to be friends years ago, because Easton used to bring Tim in to do clinics for his band kids. And then as Easton and I got to be friends, we did double duty type things. Tim would come over and do band camp stuff for me at Sam Houston, and double up with him with Easton's kids at E.D. White. And he has that same personality that Tim has. His saying that we used to always pick at him, there were never any problems. He never came to the board and said, okay, we got a problem. It was always, we have an opportunity. We knew it was something bad about to happen, but we always had an opportunity. But he was that kind, such a wonderful, wonderful mentor for all of us. And that's how we all got involved, because we learned that was part of what we do. That this is part of our teaching job. In fact, Easton was the one that started the Lmea Foundation, which at this point we have over $180,000 in it, and we've already put $75,000, $80,000 back into the Allstate groups through this foundation. But to tell you the kind of board and the kind of people that we were dealing with back then, we started he started that foundation by asking the board members, whenever you get, how we go there and we get our little bitty tenants check for mileage, this type of stuff. He said, if any of y'all would like to donate any of that, every board member I know for 2 or 3 years would hand it to be putting in to start that foundation. That's how the foundation money started. These kind of people that were giving up their time, their effort, but this is what meant enough to them. So we hit it at a great time, Pat and I did. And
Bruce.
And we met many, many, many great people through that.
Yeah, Bruce, that's great to hear you say and bring up those names from the past. I know that the foundation is something that a lot of people don't know about. So since you mentioned about that foundation money, what does Lmea use that foundation money for?
Well, and I'll only tell you the little bit I know about this kind of stuff. Again, Easton was a man of many talents, many, many, many talents. Trying to follow his footsteps was hard, but he took me under his wing. He had started when he got out of teaching at E.D. White. He started doing foundation work there for the university. So he brought it to the board that this would be a good way to start building some money into the kind of a rainy day type thing for the Lmea board. So if things happen, we would have somewhere to go to get us through some rough times. Well, a foundation has to have a purpose for the money. It has to be at the very beginning. We as a board had to decide, here's where this money will be spent. So it was going to be to help the kids with their Allstate. We were thinking about doing it as like a scholarship type thing. Of course, Easton was out of all of this whenever we hit the $100,000 mark, which is what our goal was, to get $100,000. Back then, that sounded like a lot of money. But we had money, all the money we had in accounts that were making 7.11%. Can you imagine those days? So I talked to the board. I said, why don't we let this money ride a while we're making such good money from this stuff? We don't need anything right now, and wait until we have built more so that we'll have more pulled in. So, and we did. And like I said, we got it up to 180 something thousand. All the prices for Allstate were going up, and the board made a decision at that time. Instead of trying to, I told them I'm not going to be responsible for figuring out who gets money from this foundation. That's not what I'm going to do. So we decided what we would do is take any money that the foundation makes and put it into the Allstate to drop the fees that those kids are paying. And so that's what we've been doing. And it's really been beneficial.
Absolutely. It always goes back to the student. That's what I've noticed while being on the board. Myself, and I heard Pat kind of mention this a minute ago, but myself coming into the profession, my first teaching job was in Eunice High School, junior high school, and elementary. We did all three programs at the same time. I followed, drove a long way. Brett was doing driving. I drove from Lafayette every day, which was a long drive, but I enjoyed the drive. I didn't mind it. I followed Robin Daigle, who Brett mentioned just a minute ago as well. Robin has always been a big inspiration for me, and she kind of guided me to get involved with the organization and involved with teaching. And I would always go, our pathways followed each other throughout her career and continues on through my career. But I'll never forget that first district level meeting when we sat down and they were talking to me as a new person. They said, okay, if your kids are going to audition for Solo and Ensemble Festival, back then Solo and Ensemble Festival was huge. But if they were going to audition for this, then you need to be a member of Lmea. And the way that you become a member of Lmea is you have to be a member of, I think it was MENC back then, Music Educators National Conference.
Yeah.
So other than knowing the benefits of being involved in a national organization, the reason why I got involved with it was because my students needed to audition. So that's why I did that, not really knowing why. But our historian, Pat, I think it's really important for us to know our history, because that can kind of help us improve on how we can move forward into the future. So, Pat, would you mind kind of sharing with the very beginnings of Lmea and how we got started and why we got started?
Well, Lmea, all of us who are members now today, even us really old folks like Bruce and I, we weren't around at the very beginning of it. And we really don't sometimes appreciate how difficult it was to get this thing going, and the tremendous impact that Lmea has actually had on music education throughout our state from the get-go. The name that I always like to bring up that people say, who's that? Is Sam T. Burns. Samuel T. Burns came on the scene in 1934. Which in retrospect is right whenever Huey Long is leaving the governorship and he's become U.S. Senator, and his hand-picked successor is O.K. Allen. And he has an agenda for O.K. Allen, because nothing happens in Louisiana without Huey P. Long's hand in it. And he wanted several things that had to do with infrastructure at schools. And included in that schools was music education spread out across the entire state. We did have it in strong pockets with teachers, particularly in Baton Rouge and in New Orleans, that had full-time teachers and had some pretty good programs. And much of the credit for that belongs to Henry Stouffer, Dr. Stouffer at LSU, who came on the scene much earlier, about 1915. But across the state, it was a wasteland, really. So when they hired Sam Burns, he spent very little time in Baton Rouge for 4 years. But from 1934 to 1938, he traveled all across this state on every paved road, dirt road, gravel road that existed, talking to community leaders, talking to school officials, talking to the few music teachers that did exist and the organizations that they belonged to, which were relatively small and weak and narrow in scope. And so he was really the Pied Piper. He said, we got to get this together. And he had his marching orders basically from Governor Allen, which was really Governor Long in disguise, to make this thing happen. So his job was to convince everybody we needed to put music programs in every community, every school possible across the state. That it wasn't just for those people who lived in certain areas that had enough money in their school district to have it. Now that was a monumental task, and he pulled it off. He convinced them that Lmea would be an umbrella organization. We got the piano teachers, and we got orchestra teachers, and the band directors, and everybody, even some of the church choir, as well as the school choir, engaged in this to join so that he could have a unified voice in making things happen and communicating with everybody to pull this thing off. One of the more pivotal things was in 34, he brought a bunch of the band masters up to the University of Illinois for the National Band Association meeting. And they discovered that all of their band master associations were linked to a statewide organization like an Lmea that had strength in numbers. Let's all come together and make things happen. So when they came back from the University of Illinois, they were on fire to make Lmea really happen. A lot of Dr. Burns' understanding of all this, that it had to start in the elementary schools. And he made it happen that way. He instituted that first all-state elementary choir in 1935 that had, listen to this. This is not a joke. He had 5,970 Louisiana elementary kids in an all-state choir performing in New Orleans for the Southern Division of the National Music Association. Now that was a big deal. That was huge to be able to do that in that short a period of time and pull it off. He also was the guy that came up with the idea that we don't have enough music teachers out there for all of these elementary schools. So let's find a way that we can help elementary teachers teach music better. And he instituted these recordings, record players. All the schools had a record player, maybe a record player, but they had a record player. And it was a vinyl records, and it wasn't just excerpts from symphonies or choir programs. It was actually teaching solfeggio. It was teaching young children how to sing specific songs in a very methodical manner that any elementary music teacher could put the record player on and could teach those kids without a music background or without a piano in the room to provide an accompaniment. So it was the equivalent of today of just real high technology that he, made happen. But even more important, I know in Bruce and Stein earlier, our conversation we had talked about, we were first coming in, was how involved all of our universities were and how powerful their impact and their support was to make Lmea work. So Dr. Burns was smart enough to get guys like Harry Pottle at Southeastern and Bob Gilmore, there to eventually evolve to UL and so forth, and others around the state, along with, of course, Dr. Stokford, LSU, to take leadership roles in Lmea. Of our initial Lmea presidents, when you look at that lineup of those first presidents and so forth, I mean, it's dominated by university, school of music, directors or deans or, that sort of thing, or they're the person they assign to. Dr. Bulver at McNeese used Norman Smith a great deal in that purpose as a part of the board. So the state superintendent of music, which Dr. Burns was the very first one, and the heads of the music departments at our various universities were actually the leaders. They were the ones who launched Lmea, held it together, provided mentorship, provided facilities as we began to develop festivals, provided the music instructors to serve as judges and all sorts of other roles, so forth, and doing all the logistical support for this. They had just an extremely important role to play in all of this. In the piano part of it, you look at Polly Gibb there at LSU. I mean, I don't know how you can explain how important a role she played in piano instruction in the state of Louisiana to make this happen. Now, we had other pioneers, Louise Alton in elementary was extraordinary. I mean, she graduated from Thibodeau High, went to LSU. Her first teaching job, I believe, was in Gonzales. If I forgot all the stories right in my head. But she really was the pioneer of elementary music instruction throughout, the state. Like Velma Wiley was in 1935, she was choir director of Morgan City. And I think she was a product of Northwestern. But her influence, she was the first state vocal chairman, just like Polly was the first piano chairman for Lmea. I mean, they're the ones who really got it going, and how you organize all this stuff and how you make it happen, and trying to create something that's more standards based in our festival for judging, for our choirs, and for the elementary, with how they would put all those things together. But even while all this was going on, Lmea was extremely tied to the state supervisor of music and to what the state supervisor of music needed to have done in order to produce enough music teachers to fill all the jobs that we were creating. And I mean, it's just an amazing story. I'm talking a long time here, and I'm giving you barely just a part of the fingernail of part of the story of what actually happened. It really is an amazing story. And the central purpose for Lmea then, this is what made it happen, wasn't necessarily how many elite bands, choirs, orchestras could we produce. It was how many children's lives could we touch in the state of Louisiana. At every school and every community, regardless of the economic status or whatever, so forth. It's just how much music instruction legitimate can we bring, and then after we bring it there, how do we elevate it into top-notch programs, through standards-based things, with much of what we're familiar with in our honor groups, and things like that. I'll mention only two other names, and I'll let it go. Let some other people talk about maybe if they want to talk about where it went. Frank Menino really got the jazz thing going, and that was really kind of in Bruce and our time early on. He was the one that did it, and I had the privilege to sit between Whitey Bush and Pete Damborian as they were warming up for that first jazz concert. And let me tell you why. You think I know some history? You're talking to these guys. I mean, they knew everything about everything. And they could tell you how this happened, how that happened. We think that this is what happened. That's not really what happened. This is what happened. Those stories that they had, of course, they're telling it in their New Orleans dialect. They can, all my New Orleans friends, y'all speak a whole different language than we do. But it was always fun to listen to these guys and see what really happened. The first all-state orchestra was really the imagination of Francis Lambert, but he lived it through Norman Smith. Norman Smith was on the faculty, and he made that first all-state orchestra happen for us. So we owe a lot. All these names I keep throwing out here that most of our younger members are saying, who's that? What's that? I don't have no clue who that is or how they did this or how all of this happened. But whatever it is that we are today and whatever it is we've become in the future, we got to thank a lot of guys and gals back there who made this thing happen for us.
Yeah, such a rich history, Pat. I wish that we could devote one session on just the history, but because time won't allow, I want to kind of move forward just a little bit more. But, because of the many challenges that Lmea faced through the years, it's interesting to hear that the supervisor of music was so instrumental in the formation of Lmea and how much involvement all of the supervisors and the college directors had early on, and how we don't even have a state supervisor right now. So what happened with that? Where did we lose our supervisor, and what do you think that we could go back to getting representation at the state level?
Well, yes, I think it's possible for us to finally turn that corner and bring that back. What happened was, first, we lost such really powerful people. You know, Lloyd Funches, who was state supervisor of music for a long, long time, was really using Doris Bienvenue and other people like that. They created all of our curriculum, got stuff into our coursework. You know, the college requirements to become a music teacher, really, Dr. Stouffer at LSU, I think, was the godfather for that. But for what was actually taught in the schools, Lloyd Funches was the man. I mean, he knew the inside workings of Baton Rouge, that State Department of Education, for a long, 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 long time. He made all of that happen. Now, losing, you know, somebody like that has an impact. But really what turned the corner on us was whenever accountability came into play, and the focus became so strong on standardized tests, standardized test scores, and grading teachers and grading schools based on the outcomes of those things. And that didn't happen overnight, but it happened very steadily and gradually through the 1990s into the 2000s and so forth. Unfortunately, I was an administrator at the school level and in the district level while that was happening, and you could just see it eroding. You could see it being replaced. And I'll tell you a story, and I'm the first time I've ever told this story, okay? Other than my wife. My wife knows the story well, and there's a couple of former superintendent Calcasieu Parish knows the story, okay? I was offered the position of state supervisor in music education. They asked me to, you know, fill out an application. They asked me to so forth. They said, we want you and want you to come up here and so forth. And at the time, I was the music supervisor for Calcasieu Parish, is what I was. I was doing a lot of curriculum work because I'd been a former principal and dealt with council. And so when they told me one of the jobs, so I said, well, I talked to my wife. I said, let's give it a shot. Let's see what we can do. I mean, we'd end up having to move to Baton Rouge, whatever, so forth. My superintendent called me in because, of course, the state superintendent called him and said, look, Pat and Bill said he would accept the job, you know, this sort of thing. Called me and said, Pat, let me tell you what's going to happen. You're going to get that job, and whatever they tell you to do, you're going to do great. I'm not talking to you about that. But I'm going to tell you, you're going to be extraordinarily disappointed, and you're going to resign from that position because you're going to get so frustrated and angry. Because he saw the handwriting on the wall. He said, this accountability thing, they're hiring you because you know a lot about the music, but what they really want to hire you is because of what you know about curriculum and accountability and dealing with this. That's what they want you. And eventually they're going to turn you just into that. You're not going to be able to do anything about the music. You'd be lucky if you ever would. That was the lecture I got from him. I didn't know whether to believe him or not, but he was telling me the truth.
But you saw the writing on the wall. Yeah, absolutely.
He had that insight. He saw where this is going. He says, you're just throwing yourself to the wolves. You do what you want, but you're throwing yourself to the wolves. And eventually talked me out of it and put a little incentive in there for me to stay. It also helped me make up my mind. But the people that got into that job after I turned it down, there was a whole lot of, you know, Richard Baker and so forth, there's a whole lot of frustration. It was just like, you know, and I'm not speaking ill of Mr. White, but when John White took the job, that was pretty much the last nail in the coffin. This wasn't going to work after that. And shortly thereafter, we really didn't have anybody supervising anything in the arts, you know, formally. It was just a side dude they might give to somebody.
Well, that's what long story. Yeah. Well, that's so interesting to hear. When I first got on the board, Richard Baker was the supervisor of music, so I knew Lmea with representation at the state level, but I saw that position erode, and he lost his job, and we've never been able to have representation at the state level. So certainly, you know, it's something that I would like to work very hard towards seeing again. And I think the work that Jenny is doing with the LAUF with Lmea is really been tremendous so far in this short amount of time. but it's going to take a lot of effort on a lot of people's parts so that we can get a full seat at the table. So I certainly look forward to that. Carol mentioned something about Tom Wafer. Tom, we just recently has passed, unfortunately, and all of you that have attended a convention have met Tom Wafer, even though you didn't know who Tom Wafer was, because he was always at the registration desk. He was always there. He always wanted to help. But could one of you just kind of say a few words, just a couple of minutes, because we have to move on. But please say something about his role in Lmea.
Tom was a heck of a music teacher, first of all. I mean, he really was. And then whenever he began to shift over into more of administrative roles and so forth like that, he spent a lot of years on the board. And when he got to the State Department of Education is whenever he had served the job as being editor of Louisiana Musician before Dr. Bulber was. He was the chairman of the state conference, the conference part of, not the all-state, but the conference part of it, before he took the job for the state. Tom did a myriad of jobs during his time frame for Lmea and with Lmea before he ever even got to the state supervisor's job there in Baton Rouge. But I mean, knowledgeable. He knew the stuff. He knew the history. I think he did everything that could have humanly been done to help music programs when he was at the State Department of Education. I think he was a good voice of reason, and he could tell our side of the story well to help people understand. But again, I think the handwriting was on the wall. They had nothing to do with Tom or Richard. That's not what happened. They were fine people and gave it all that they had. It was something far bigger than them.
Well, thank you, Pat. Yeah, Tom. I've known him my entire time on the Lmea board, and he's always been very supportive of all of us. So we'll miss him. Now on to some. I guess there's been questions in the past about Lmea's stance on competition. It can be controversial sometimes, but I wanted to kind of ask Bruce to speak a little bit on Lmea's involvement of the marching band activity and festivals in particular, and talk a little bit about how the early years of marching band festivals were adjudicated, and kind of talk about the philosophy of why Lmea doesn't want to go into the competitive field.
Well, as I was telling Scotty, that I can remember when I was in high school, the one big marching contest that they had was LSU ran. It was not run through the Lmea or any of this type of stuff. It just happened to always be a part of District 5 with almost all of my teaching. And we never had a Lmea district marching festival. Only 6 of the districts did. When I first started teaching, there were only 7 districts, of course. We didn't have 8 or 9 at that time. And in fact, 8 was where I started up in Zwally. That's 60 miles south of Shreveport. That district was all the way from Shreveport across right before you get to Ruston, all the way down to Pineville, Alexandria, and then all the way down through Leesville and Vernon Parish. That was all one district. And they would run marching festivals. They would run them up in the Shreveport part of the every year, and then they do the concert festivals in Natchitoches at the university or the Natchitoches. So I don't know that Baton Rouge ever had an Lmea district marching festival, and I know District 9 never did, so, or District 5. The rest of them did, and our rules set up. We were not into you know how things have developed so much from marching band over these last 25, 30 years. Now you have to have a trophy for every majorette. Everything's got to have some kind of you got to walk away with some kind of medal, or you were not successful. And I know that's part of the way kids have been taught that and we're at fault in letting them be this way. Lmea never has bought into that. Our marching festivals were still, you'd go, you'd have 3 band judges judge the marching festival. Scotty was asking about when I first started teaching, and I never did judge it, but when I first started teaching, we still had inspection. If you went to an Lmea marching festival, there was inspection at the beginning of the marching festival. And that's where they went and they'd have the kids, you'd have to remember the number on your horn, everything got to be clean. They pull the slides, check your gloves, all this kind of stuff. I told her that was one of the worst things that ever happens when we dropped that years ago, because that seemed to always be a reason for kids to keep everything clean and everything in place, know their serial numbers, all the, name me a kid that knows the serial number on their horn now, or the last time they actually greased the slide. I know, different world. But this is the concept that we were in at that time. At the same time, LaGrange started a big marching festival for this part of the state. And then things started popping up throughout the state. When the LSU thing died down over there, some festivals over closer to the New Orleans area started cropping up. And Lmea just never did get into competition with any of that. We did meet with Jerry Waggis had a committee that met with the board one time asking us to look into running a big state marching contest, us being able to assign the state. And we brought it to the board, discussed it for a long time, and they still came back with this understanding is we believe in festivals. Everybody can leave at the end of the night successful. Whereas if you go there and you got a winner, that means everybody else is a loser. And that's not what the Lmea concept was at that time. I'm not telling you that's not what it is now, but the times it came up, that was the roadblock. We just felt like, and concert had always been the way it was. We never did anything that would try to isolate or try to start making it like you're competitive. How can the Lafayette High Band be better than the St. Amand Band? That's 2 different things. Both of them phenomenal. The same way with the marching. So that's kind of the way it ended up through all of these years. A lot of the other states I judge in, they make all of their money for the whole year through their state marching stuff. It's a big, big thing. It just was not anything that Lmea, the concept of having a contest was not something that ever got passed through our board.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that also another thing we were talking earlier about how the testing in schools has demanded more time, looking at things that it's affected with curriculum, how, when I was in high school, everybody could be in a jazz band. Now, jazz band, it's hard to get a jazz band during the school day. It has to be after school. Solo and ensemble festival, as large as it used to be when I first started teaching, it slowly eroded because of those same things. And I'm happy and proud to be part of Lmea that's trying to have a resurgence with that. I think Lee is doing a fantastic job with the jazz division. I think I've seen more involvement with jazz throughout the state. And, with Solo and Ensemble Festival, I think that's going to make a big comeback. It was really great to see that that student recital that happened on the first night of Lmea. That was an absolutely phenomenal performance that I'm so proud to see the kids throughout the state with that. So I look forward to developing that more in the future. Recently, when I first came onto the board, there was a vote that was taken for seceding from the National Association. It was difficult at the time because we didn't see the purpose. So I think that it's part of, realizing our history again and in keeping with that in the future. But there was some discord with being part of the National Association because we just didn't see the purpose of being involved. So there was a vote that was taken, as you all know. The vote did not pass. So one of the things that I decided as the president-elect at the time was that I wanted to see what NAFME was all about. So Brett, I talked to Brett, who was the district director at the time. He's always been a very good friend of mine, and we've always talked about things throughout our career. So we talked about going to the National Assembly together. And I tell you guys, it was an absolutely eye-opening experience for both Brett and myself. We also had Angela Jones and Jim Trent that were along on the trip. But I wanted Brett to kind of talk a little bit about that experience and what we encountered with meeting all of the national folks. Brett?
Yeah, guys, it was a really instrumental part of our present and the future of Lmea. So Scotty and I we were invested in giving it the old college try. You know, the membership had spoken, and we were going to do everything we could to find out exactly what NAFME could do for us. So we went to DC, and credit to Diane Edelman, who at the time was Southern Division president. She became our nanny. She became our guide. She became our mom at the time. And she basically had the attitude, you don't know what NAFME can do for you? Well, let me show you. Up in DC, I don't know if we felt such hospitality north of I-10 in the way that we were treated and the way that we were welcome. We were impressed by the world-class leaders who were just basically professionals in their field in a voluntary capacity. We made immediate connections with people like Tiffany Kearns with Country Music Association, the foundation, Chiho Fiendler with Save the Music, Matt Baruch, who's the advocacy chair, Tushar Swain, who was a policy director. A lot of eye-opening experiences when we go talk to our congressmen, and they really don't know the value of music and the things that we know that music can provide for our students. But it's not their fault if they don't know that, because they haven't been ingrained with that education. The research is there, but if you're not going to go look at it, then you don't know about it. So it's our job, and we found that it was our job to begin to understand how to advocate for ourselves. So we found that we did belong. We had a lot of answers and probably more questions than answers at the time, but we knew that we were on the right track. We knew that we were making the right decision to keep plugging in. Then we go to the Southern Division Conference. At the time was in Tennessee. Once again, eye-opening, ear-filling experiences, but it was a little bit different this time because we got to connect with other state executives and figure out how are they connected to NAFME. What are they doing with advocacy? Then we started hearing about diversity organizations, and it's just so many great ideas, and we've developed those relationships. They're a phone call away, they're an email away. They're great friends of ours, and they're great partners with Lmea moving forward. It was just a really learning experience, and all the things that you're seeing here with Lmea doing that now, these are only the beginning steps. We haven't really even begun to check the boxes yet. It's just been action plans. So somebody recently asked me, well, what is Lmea doing for me? How is advocacy going to help me teach better in my band room? And I said, well, you have to wait till those plans become realized. I said, you're not going to see it quite yet because we're working toward it. But 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the line, you can look back and see the change that Lmea has made on the state level, national level, local level. You'll see those changes. Just give us a chance to keep plugging in. And I'm so excited that this is not even the end. This is just the beginning. We haven't even thought about things that we haven't thought about yet in what Lmea could be doing and will be doing for our future directors and students.
Thank you, Brett. Yes, absolutely. And we talk about that all the time. It's a marathon and not a sprint. We've got a long way to go, a lot of work to do, but we need a lot of people to help us. At first, just to add what Brett was saying, at first when we both went to those national leadership conference and we went to the Southern Division, we were simply observers. It was like deer with the headlights about to get hit on the highway, because we had no idea what we were getting into. But in this short amount of time, it's really great to see that we are I see that we have a 5-minute warning, so we're trying to move as quickly as we can. But it's great to see that we are a major player now. In fact, Jenny with the Louisiana Advocacy Leadership Force, she and Brett and I were one of some of the guest panelists on a NAFME session. They wanted to feature us and show how we were developing that. The efforts of the DEI, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Group, with James as the chairperson, the sessions that I've attended at conference is it's just incredibly heartwarming, and I'm so excited about that group moving into the future. So with the amount of time that we have now, I'd like to do a few, well, first, Pat, if you would kind of, in looking at the history, and again, now we're kind of looking at the history because that's what Brett and I did, going to the National Assembly and looking at what's going on and then bringing it back here. History dictates that that's what our fathers did in the very beginning. So in looking at where we have come from, where we are now, what do we need to do moving forward? How can we preserve our association and music for the students in Louisiana?
I think we need to do things that align a little bit better with what our original intent and purpose was, and that was to see just how many children in this state that we can get involved in music at every school and at every in every community. And that is going to be a difficult task for Lmea to do on its own, but little things they've done, like I can't compliment y'all enough about the Robert Wilhite Award. Those are the sorts of things that are encouraging people to be a part of and to join. Let's do things for these people that are really in situations that it could die on the vine. That we could do. I think another thing that it was done in the 30s, it was done in the 50s, and it can be done today. At all these little schools and communities and so forth that don't have music programs, the people who do have music programs need to go there and perform. They need to go there. They need to find a way to get involved in those communities and do things, because they'll get hungry for it if you give them a taste of it. And they say, well, why can't we have that? Why don't we have that? Those sorts of things. We have to be thinking about that. I know the whole discussion, y'all, that you asked about Bruce about the contests, sort of thing, whatever, so forth. Our founding fathers would have looked at that idea as being counterproductive, because the idea was to make as many people get involved and then elevate it with standards-based, not with competition-based, where you got one winner, really. And all the other groups have done a magnificent job. They ought to be awarded just as much. They walk away feeling like, well, we didn't make it. We didn't. When they did, they were fantastic. Yeah. And this younger, smaller groups feel intimidated. Yeah. By that whole concept.
Pat, tremendous.
Promote.
Promote music. Tremendous advice. We just have a couple of more minutes, and I wanted to give a few rapid fire questions before we close. So, gentlemen, the most rewarding part of serving on Lmea. Pat, you first.
I don't know where I'd be if I hadn't been pulled into Lmea. It really gave me my first experience an overview. I only saw things from a school level. And later on, even when I became principal and whatever, so forth, if I hadn't had that opportunity to see how teamwork works and how this comes together, and sometimes you got to make sacrifices for the greater good and all that sort of stuff, the Lmea it was a booster rocket for me.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. What would you tell your younger self, Bruce?
Take better care of your body.
Okay, that's great advice. Next question. Advice for new teachers, Brett.
You are not finished with student teaching. Continue to learn your craft, ask questions, bring others into your program, go to conferences, be kind, be patient, develop a long-term plan, have a vision.
Awesome words, Brett. Yeah, and seek information from the old timers. Go and find out information. I still remember the first time I judged any contest or festival. It was sitting across the table with Red Lapperouse, and his words of wisdom. I had to write it down because it was so insightful. And he told me my very first year, he said, the greatest sin a teacher can commit is to not sufficiently prepare his students for the challenges he forces them to accept. I mean, he said that, and it was profound. And I had to get out a little receipt and write it on the back of that thing, and I kept it in my wallet my entire career. So yeah, there's so much knowledge out there. I think we're probably about a time, but if anybody has a quick question, we can answer it, but it looks like we're probably going to get kicked off anyway. So yes, everyone, thank you so much. We have enjoyed doing this for you. We have enjoyed this conference tremendously. We look forward to when we can have a face-to-face to where we can hug each other again. But we also look forward to using this platform to better ourselves, because this is, giving us this opportunity has been tremendous. Thank you to all of you for your hand in putting this on. And again, we look forward to greeting and meeting you in the future. Enjoy the final concert of Lmea conference this year, the United States Marine Band. Everyone have a great, great, great year.